Dear church, let's talk about the Magnolia Foundation with Matt Collins. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley, joined by Matt Collins today. Matt, thank you so much for being on the program and talking to us about a wonderful, wonderful foundation that you have started that is thriving, doing well, something that I heard about back in January and that I just knew that I had to have you on here to talk about and to plug because we like to highlight the good here on Dear Church. And certainly what you're doing, what your wife is doing is good stuff. But before we jump in, tell our audience a little bit about you, what's going on in your life and in Cookeville, Tennessee, right?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Chris, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. My wife and I, we live in Cookeville, Tennessee, about an hour or so east of Nashville. And we real close to the campus of Tennessee Tech University. So great place to live. We've been here for about 10 years. And I spent, the first 12 years of my post-college life, doing youth ministry. And my wife, she's a teacher. And so that's the life that we lived for a long time, working in the church and our most recent stop has been at the College Side Church of Christ in Cookeville, and we are still members here and love this area, love this community, and love ministry and the church and all the people that have been a part of our lives. We've been blessed by because of the church, and so just grateful to have been able to serve in that way for a long time, and now grateful to do what we do now with the Magnolia Foundation.
Yeah, and so obviously we want to get into all of that and what the Magnolia Foundation does. But behind every great cause, there's a great story. It's a tragic story, and but one that you guys have found a way to bloom where you've been planted. And I just love this, what has grown out of this, even though it does have tragic roots. So why don't you walk us through the story of what led you to starting the Magnolia Foundation?
Yeah. So my wife, Macy, and I, we have three girls, Hattie and Lainey and Davy. And we, at this point, we can't imagine being anything other than girl parents and having girls. It's just a life that we live. And and so we love it so much and love all of our girls. Several years ago, in March of 2020, there was a tornado that came through Cookeville. And close to 2 a.m., 1:45, 2 in the morning on March the 3rd, early morning, March the 3rd of 2020, that tornado came right down our street, and our house was directly in the line of that storm. And so that early that morning, we had two of our three girls at the time. Our youngest wasn't born yet, but Hattie and Lainey. And as a result of that storm and its impacts on our house and where we were, we lost our oldest daughter, Hattie. And of course, there's a lot that we could share about that event and kind of the moments in and around that. But, Chris, it's as bad as you can imagine. It's as bad as you think it is. And my wife, Mason, and I, we were in the hospital for a week. At the time, our youngest, Lainey, who's our middle daughter now, she was flown to Vanderbilt, and she was there for about a week. But we lost Hattie that night or that morning, and our experience, since then has, been filled with, all the emotions you can picture, a lot of sadness and hurt, loneliness, anger, fear. I mean, all of those feelings we've experienced, and you too. We were loved on by a lot of people and have continued to be loved on by a lot of people. Really specifically, God's people have loved on us in tremendous ways. Our local church here in Cookeville, but also churches really from all over. I've found out about our story. I was in ministry, in youth ministry, and had a lot of connections in ministry. And so a lot of churches heard about us and knew about us, and so supported us in a variety of ways. And our story was pretty public. You can read about Hattie's story even to this day, you can still find articles and stories and news articles about her from all over the country. And in the midst of all of that, one of the things, as we reflected several years after, that we really never found was an organization that purposefully walked alongside families who've lost children, and it just wasn't something that we interacted with, and we didn't know, like, do those people exist or do they not? And we really were searching for a long time with kind of what to do with ourselves after we lost Hattie. And I struggled with, can I still do ministry? What does that look like? And do I want to do that, or is there something different? And so we wrestled with a lot of those things for 4 years after that. But we kind of gravitated towards, we want to honor Hattie in her life in some way. And so as we kind of try to discern what life looked like and what was going to be on the horizon for us, we just kind of settled in on, okay, our people, are the ones that have lost children like us. That's kind of the place we find ourselves. And how can we serve people like us? How can we serve those people? So many people that, you lose a child, and so many people lose a child really in silence, and nobody knows, and nobody's there to walk alongside them or care for them. And so we wanted to be those people. Essentially, it's kind of how it started. And so we started what we call the Magnolia Foundation, and would love to share why it's called that, if that's okay.
Yes, I actually wanted to get to that at some point, because that is such a remarkable story. So yeah, whenever you want to insert that, please do.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of moments, Chris, in the past several years. We've more than a couple. We've had a lot, but a couple I want to highlight that we believe are from the Lord, that are just moments in our life that have been really meaningful and impactful, really profound for us. One of those moments was the night before the storm. Hattie's, the last words she ever said was that she could see Jesus. My wife was laying in her bed and trying to get her to fall asleep, and she wasn't going to sleep. And she had read her book and sang all these songs to her. And finally she looked over at my wife and she said, "Mommy, I can't sleep. I'm not sleeping." And Macy said, "You need to settle down. You need to go sleep. It's getting late." And she said, I can see Jesus." And Macy said, What do you mean you can see Jesus? And she said, "Yeah, I can see Jesus." And she said, What's he doing, or what's he look like, or tell me what you're looking at. And she said, "I can see Jesus, Mommy, and he's wearing all white." And those are the last words that she ever said. She fell asleep. She woke up at some point in time in the night and got in our bed, as she often did. But she never spoke another word. And we have hung on to that memory. And we believe the Lord is holding her for us. And we believe that she saw him, and that he was with her every step of the way. And so we've had that, but we had another right after, about 10 days or so after the storm. We had a funeral, and somebody had given us, a family that we still don't know, we never met them, gave us four burial plots at a local funeral home here in Cookeville. And so the first time that we saw that, the grave was the day of the burial after the funeral. And so we're driving up, and we're getting closer to the graveside, and we're going with everybody else at the same exact time. So everybody's leaving the funeral home, going to the grave. And so we're riding in the car with everybody else. We see the big tent that you look for graveside services. And right there, next to her grave was this big magnolia tree. And a few days before the storm, Hattie was riding in the car with Macy, and she said, "Mommy, can you show me a magnolia tree?" And Macy said, I I'll show you one. We're not around any right now, but when we get the opportunity, I'll show you a magnolia tree. Well, that opportunity never came. And so as we pulled up to the grave, the first thing that Macy noticed is Hattie's grave sits in the shade of a magnolia tree. And so, I mean, Macy noticed it immediately and grabbed my hand and pointed it out to me, of what tree was right there. And so from that moment, the magnolia has been really special for us. It's been meaningful. Yeah. We have a magnolia tree in our front yard now. And our youngest, Davy, she was born after the storm and before the foundation. And so we named her Davy. Her middle name is Magnolia. And so when we decided to start this foundation, we wanted to name it after Hattie, in a similar way that we really named Davy after her older sister Hattie. Right. So we named it the Magnolia Foundation. And so we serve families who have lost children from birth to 18, and that's been it's something that we love tremendously, and it's something that we hate that we have to do, but it's what we do now.
Yeah, Matt, tell us a little bit about the impact that you guys have been able to have. Maybe some memorable situations with families that you've been able to help, or I find it so encouraging when I see Christians use adversity as an opportunity to do ministry. And certainly that's what you've done. You've turned a negative into a positive. And talk about the impact. I know you don't want to blow your own horn here, but if you don't mind doing that for a few minutes, what kind of situations, people have you come across that you've been able to help?
Yeah, Chris. So we help in really three primary ways with families. The first is we help with funeral expenses. And so when there's a family that loses a child, the vast majority of families are obviously not prepared for that moment in a lot of ways. But one of those ways is from a financial perspective, it costs a lot of money, to walk through the funeral process, the burial process. And so we help with funerals for families who've lost children. The second thing that we do is we help with access to counseling. There are, everybody has a unique approach to grief, but none of us are immune to grief. All of us experience grief and live in a lot of grief from a variety of circumstances and situations. And so losing a child certainly has grief, a heavy amount of grief attached to it. And so we want to help families learn how to grieve well, individually, but also grieve well within their family context together. If it's a family unit, a mother and a father and siblings and all of those, I mean, there's a tremendous impact it has individually, but also that loss has as a family. And so we want to try to help families learn from professionals on how to grieve well together. And what we're hoping is that not only does the counseling help provide them with beginning of healing processes, but also helps families stay together and marriages stay together and things like that. And so we help support families in that way. And the third thing that we do is what we call commemorative care. And so what that is just a longer term walk with the family. Every year brings about dates that come every year, right? So birthdays and holidays and anniversaries and things like Mother's Day and Father's Day, and those happen every year. And so in the immediate aftermath of loss, families can feel really, some families can feel really surrounded and loved. Other families may not. But either way, at some point in time, every family experiences a similar feeling because everybody seems to go back to their normal life, but you never do, right? Right. The parents have lost a child. They never go back to what used to be. It's impossible. And in that, there's a lot of loneliness that develops. Does anybody remember? Does anybody know? Does anybody still think about me or my child? Or, this is my child's birthday, and this is what should be, but it's never going to be. And so through commemorative care, we reach out to families, physically mail them something to put in their hands on those days during the year. So their child's birthday, Mother's Day, Father's Day, the holidays, anniversary of loss, just for them to know that their child is still loved and that they are still loved and they are not forgotten. And so those are the ways that we serve those families. And Chris, we get in contact with new families every single week. Every week we have new families that we begin communication with. This year alone, just from January 1st to now, we've averaged, being able to help with a funeral, almost one a week.
Really?
We're able to help with a funeral, almost one every week so far this year.
Wow.
And so, and that's, we get in contact with multiple new families a week. And it's something that is unfortunately, it's a steady presence. We have new families that lose kids all the time. And so we try to serve the best that we can. And we hear a lot of stories, as you might imagine, all of them tragic. It's, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you're doing this because it takes a special person to be able to pour into people, hearing these tragic stories all the time. What are some words of advice you would give to someone who, wants to console the grieving, wants to help those that are dealing with a situation such as yours? Because, I think we talk about that in sermons and everything else, but what are some practical ways that we can help someone who is hurting and trying to heal? You mentioned the commemorative part of this, which I think is great, because I feel like in our culture, once the funeral's over, we kind of tend to think everybody just goes back to normal.
Yes.
And that's not what happens.
Right.
So any wisdom you can impart to us about how to, maybe through your own personal experience or how you've helped others?
Yeah. One thing that I would say is if you're walking with someone, or if you're aware of someone that's walking in grief, and it can be any kind of grief, right? Loss of a child, loss of a spouse, of a grandparent, a friend, a brother, whatever, right?
Right.
Really, man, I would say to not avoid those people is one of the first things that I would encourage people to do. I can tell you, I can think about situations where, in our own experience and the experience of others that I've spoken with, where people are really afraid of us. And I think it comes from a good place. I think people are afraid to say the wrong thing, and they're afraid to say something that's bad. And so, unfortunately, the default becomes, well, we are just not going to say anything. And so, when people avoid those that are in grief, all it does is create more isolation and more hurt. And so I would encourage people to be present in the lives of those who are grieving, to be physically, actually present with them, and to talk to them, and give space for those people to feel all of the feelings they feel, to not explain away anything. We often want to fix things or find answers to things. And many times in the middle of grief and loss, there are no answers. There's nothing to fix.
Yeah.
And so just allow people to feel what they feel and how they feel. So if they're angry, that's okay. If they're sad, that's okay. If they're hurt, that's okay. Let those people feel those things and feel them all the way, but not trying to explain things. If there's one phrase I would encourage people to remove from their vocabulary, it's everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
That phrase it's bogus. It's not true. And so if I could, there are some things you shouldn't say, so don't say that, but don't try to fix people. Just let them feel. But then be there and ask questions and allow those people to share if they want to share. For everybody grieves differently, and so some people sharing is very therapeutic. It's helpful, and for others it's not. It's not. They don't want to share. But if you never give people space to share, if you never ask the question, then they never have the opportunity. Right.
Right.
And so I think it's okay to say, hey, Matt, tell me. Like, I know today is your daughter's birthday. Tell me what you're thinking right now. And if I want to share, I will. And if I don't, I won't, but give me the chance. And so those are a couple of things I would say, as you walk with people who are in grief.
That's really good stuff. Hey, Matt, when you go through something like this, I hear often that it can take a toll on your marriage. I know that you and Macy have a really good marriage, but talk a little bit about that. Was this a galvanizing thing at first? If you don't mind talking about that part of it, was it difficult to work through as a couple? How do couples get through this, losing a child?
Obviously every family is really unique, and what they bring to the marriage to begin with, I think, is important, right? I mean, oftentimes tragedy and grief doesn't create anything new; it reveals what's already there. And so in so many ways, it's not that Macy and I found out new things about each other, although that's probably the case in some ways. But we were certainly, helped through counseling ourselves. But one thing that we were encouraged to do, and I think that we did well as far as a marriage and a married couple, is we allowed each other to grieve individually. And so what I mean by that is, Macy did not try to force me to grieve how she was grieving. And I didn't try to force her to grieve how I was grieving either. We grieved very uniquely. So if one of us wanted to sit down and look at pictures or watch videos of Hattie and kind of relive through that way, the other one didn't, then we didn't force the other to come into that world with us, That would have, I can guarantee would have created fault lines pretty quickly, right? You want to make me do something that I don't want to do. And so we allowed each other to grieve how we needed to grieve. And still to this day, that's still the case. And so I'm someone who is, kind of by nature, but also by trade, more open about speaking, communicating with people, individually, but also on a broad scale, just because you do ministry and you're used to kind of having your life out there for everybody. And my wife is certainly more reserved in that. And so, but something that I would do that would be helpful for me is to share and talk about things. And that sometimes that wasn't what she needed for her, but she never stopped me from doing that, and I never made her do that, right? And so, for us, that's we have gone about allowing each other to grieve, how we were designed to do it. But I would say that the two of us, we were committed, obviously, to each other from the beginning. But we were committed to our to Lainey, our daughter, who was still with us, and that was really helpful for us to have an outlet to really focus so much on. Was okay, Lainey. She was almost 1. She was 2 days shy of being 1 when we lost Hattie, and so we committed to each other early on. I mean, we are not going to allow Lainey to grow up with parents who have given up on each other or on her, on the Lord. That just wasn't something we were going to do. We were going to make sure that we gave Lainey every bit of joy that we had and every bit of gladness that we had, and that she would have a full life, and that she would not grow up with parents who would take anything away from her because we had lost her sister. And so, we really rallied around, raising Lainey the best that we knew how, and giving her all of ourselves that we could give her. And then obviously Davy, as she came along, the same thing. And so, the Lord put people in our lives, to help us, certainly our family, our friends, and he also gave us space for each other to grieve how we needed to, and then gave us an outlet to love on each other, but also our kids.
Yeah. You've made so many good points and given us so much wisdom in this podcast. But one of the things you just said there that I've heard before, and I think is so valuable is, not letting this take away from your parenting of the other child. And I just, that's really good stuff. Matt, I assume that the Magnolia Foundation welcomes donations and things of that nature. So let's talk a little bit about that as we kind of wrap up. How can people contribute? What are the needs for Magnolia Foundation, and how can people get in touch with you if they need your services?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share about that. Certainly. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and what that means for the general population is we are a tax write-off, right? And so if people want to give, they can give, and it allows them to write that off on their taxes. And so that's beneficial for them. It's obviously beneficial for us. This is what we do for a living, and so we serve in a full-time capacity with the Magnolia Foundation. We have a website. It's just themagnoliafoundation.com, and you can give online there to support the work. You can find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram. On Instagram, we're just at Magnolia Foundation, and on Facebook, we're on Facebook as the Magnolia Foundation. So you can get in contact with us there, and you can find updates about what we're doing on our social media platforms. We about once a month, we will spotlight a family that we have served in a variety of ways. And so that's an opportunity for you to pray for that family and to see kind of who's walking through some of this. On our website, you can refer families to us that way, and we can serve families from all over, any state we can connect with. We've served in a variety of different states. Would love any partnership that people would like to make to us and partner with us. Our biggest need is financial needs. Funerals, counseling. I mean, all of that costs money, and so we tell people, we can be generous to those who are walking through loss, when people are generous to us. And so that's what we're trying to do is to be able to be generous to people who are in the absolute worst of times. And so when you partner with us, you're allowing the families to have funeral expenses covered. You're allowing families to get counseling and help they need, and you're allowing families to be able to have someone love on them and show them memory on important days during the year. And so it's incredibly impactful and profound, and we're grateful for everybody who partners with us to help us do that.
Yeah, it's a great work, Matt. And thank you so much for what you and Macy do. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. And I just want to let our viewers and listeners know that if you have a specific question about today's podcast, you can email me at rippleoflight or Chris.McCurley at rippleoflight.com. If you have a question specifically for Matt, we will forward it along to him, and I'm sure he'd be willing to answer any questions that you might have. Matt, Thank you again for being on today.
Hey, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.